Ew, your name is Senior Boners?
Ew.
It's like all wrinkly and liver
Ew.
spotted.
Oh my god.
That's so
What?
gross.
Senor?
I don't
I'll
see
go
any
with
little
senior.
accent.
It's senior boners. Yeah.
It's definitely
Definitely
senior
is not
boner.
senor.
No, it's Senor.
You don't get to choose. That's the thing.
It's my
Senor
name.
is spelled differently.
Senior boners, baby. Senior wrinkly, saggy boners.
That's so gross.
Hangs all the way down to the knees, just like Carl.
I mean, I'm not judging. I'm there. You know, I know how it goes.
Oh, now he's trying to hide it. Now I'm just gonna read it as Senjin's old boners.
Yep. The oldest boner of them all.
Raisin boners.
He's hiding it by being on the bottom of the charts.
Dude.
It's because he can't get it up.
Damn!
Nice.
Oh, it got even better.
Hey friends and fam, this is Soul and welcome back to another episode of Warcraft Weekly, the shillinest, I guess that's a word now, shillinest of WoW commentary. It's brought to you by the incredible, unforgettable Twitch subscribers whose names I forgot, as well as our valued patrons, including newcomers Alvin and Queen. Yes. So let's recap. It's been a heck of a week with an expected but sort of not expected surprise. A patch is on its way in the form of patch 9.0.5, the first time in WoW's modern development cycle that a 0.5 patch is coming before a 0.1. At first glance, this sounds like kind of a smart move. From their statement, this update will be a bit different from our usual patches. It's focused almost entirely on systems, responding to community feedback about rewards, doing tuning that requires the sort of notice and iteration that a PTR allows, and fixing a range of bugs that are beyond the scope of our ability to hotfix, like not getting credits for the Anima Weekly if your bags are full. Yeah, it happened with my Death Knight, because he has Ember Silk bags, and he has a lot of crap in his bags, and I'm not organized. Anyway, I talked about the highlights the other day, retuning Legendary and Covenant abilities, as well as the return of Valor, repurposed for addressing the lack of gear coming from Mythic Plus. The idea here is for those inevitable ripples that come from balance changes to happen before the next actual tier of content, although that's kind of futile because undoubtedly more balance changes are bound to come in patch 9.1, whenever that is. Despite the disruption this will cause for guilds who are still progressing, I still suppose that this is better than unleashing changes just before the start of a new season, which would add a lot of stress to players at the competitive level, because their stress turns into an obnoxious but real influence on the rest of us. There are only a few notable changes to Covenant abilities and legendaries on the PTR so far. A link to that is in the video description, but keep in mind that this is just the first of several builds that we're going to see before the patch drops sometime in March, which is technically as late as March 30th and 31st, and everything is likely to change. For example, Fleshcraft has turned into a pretty strong defensive ability to be used at an opportune time, with a faster cast time, a bigger shield, and damage reduction during the 3-second channel. Spirit Shell for Disc Priests got kind of a nerf, and the Vanquisher's Hammer for Necrolord Paladins got kind of a buff. Meanwhile, Blessing of the Seasons for Paladins isn't mentioned at all, so count on it being deleted. Just kidding, but there's a lot more to come in the following weeks, I hope. As for Valor, the debate is on over a few things like the effectiveness of this upcoming system. In a nutshell, Valor lets you upgrade your earned Mythic Plus gear based on hitting a milestone, just like in rated PvP. In the case of Valor, clearing 10s of every dungeon will let you upgrade gear to an item level of 213, and clearing 15s, aka obtaining Keystone Master, will let you upgrade to 220s, and we're talking about gear that you get from the end of dungeons. The gear that you currently have is not eligible for these upgrades. You're going to have to get new pieces after the patch drops, which can then be upgraded. So no doubt that more than a couple of players are upset that they won't have the opportunity to hoard gear before the patch or otherwise upgrade the gear that they already have, but I'm going to get to why in a little bit. Many have said that by the time the average player, not all, but the average player, by the time they can obtain Keystone Master, their item level will be somewhere along the lines of like 220-ish, which would dull the impact of being able to upgrade upgrade their gear, so what's the point? I have really mixed feelings, but I know that my perceptions on this are also thrown off because Valor is coming in the later half of a season and not in the beginning. So for a better perspective, we've got to imagine that we're at the start of Shadowlands all over again. I consider myself an average in the Mythic Plus world. In fact, here's my current record, which reflects that, sure, I can clear 10s, but I also don't care much for which keys I end up running, or I just don't run too many in a week, and I should run more. But anyway, if Valor was here at the start of Shadowlands, my behavior as a player would change. I would care about clearing these last few dungeons so I can get that one achievement for clearing 10s, which lets me upgrade my earned gear to at most an item level of 213. But on the road towards getting that, each week the Great Vault might give me an item level 220 piece, assuming that I could see that as an upgrade. So looking at it this way, if I'm just running this like a couple times a week and a number of weeks go by, Valor looks like a pretty decent and natural way of gearing up, so long as I actually get upgradable pieces that I want from the end of the dungeon, and they're, they have stats that I like. And if not, at least I'm getting some Valor. That kind of feeling, that's a feeling that we just don't have today. When the system launches in March, I know that I'm going to be pretty meh to it because it's more than likely that I'll have cleared Castle Nathria on Heroic on my main. It feels backwards if I had to go back and farm Mythic Plus for pieces to upgrade and then farm the Valor to apply these upgrades. But remember, this is a feature designed for a full season, not the later half of a season. If I had alts that I cared enough about, then I'd be telling a different story, which in so few words, this will be pretty decent for my alts. But at the start of Season 2, you can bet that I'll be wanting to push keys, not just so I can obtain my Season 2 achievement, but so that I can start gathering pieces that later I can choose to upgrade with Valor. So at my level of play at least, I think I can dig this. One of the gripes of Season 1 of Shadowlands is what I call the item level plateau, which starts at around 200 or so. Again, I'm speaking from my perspective. In the case of Mythic Plus, the drought felt real, since the end of a dungeon would drop gear no greater than item level 203, leaving similarly skilled players who played exclusively in this space with only one possible upgrade a week. Top players in Mythic Plus didn't fare all that much better, who got 2 10s at the end of each plus 15 that they would run. PvPers, they just have a more robust path with this upgrade system. And Raiders, well, Raiders weren't in such a great spot, but they at least could get lucky. In patch 905, that plateau is going to go up by roughly 10 item levels, making a clear of 10s in Mythic Plus the equivalent to having a PvP rating of 1600, which I think feels better because now both systems can do upgrades, while the Great Vault will still be where the greatest rewards can be found, weekly gating be damned. As of this writing, Ian has come out to say that messing with gearing from raids won't be touched in the upcoming patch, which I totally disagree with. I suggested that for now, raising the drop rates in raids would help even things out before Shadowlands' first content patch, and during Blizzconline, I hope to hear more on how to address more of the discourse. In hindsight, if Shadowlands were to launch with Valor for Mythic Plus and higher drop rates from raids, we would probably see bitching over other things, but I have little doubt that players would feel less pressured to run content outside of their comfort zone, and maybe, just maybe, they would be happier. So while you're finishing up in the bathroom, ask yourself if Valor does work, not in March, but at the start of the next season, which is like summer or so. Speaking of waiting too long, in less than a week, Blizzconline will begin, emulating the festival of gaming minus the expensive trip, the overpriced swag, the long lines, the crowds, the uncomfortable hotel beds, and the chicken and waffles, the meeting with friends, the being away from home for a change, celebrating gaming with fellow fans. I'm a mix of emotion, okay? But if anything, I am excited, because this time around, I will be on co-streaming all the WoW-related stuff over on our Twitch channel, so together we can react and laugh and cry and rage out and salivate over brand new, sexy, arousing content. Ah, cool. With an online convention comes the convenience of a compressed experience, and we've got the schedule right here. I'm going to be broadcasting Friday the 19th around 1 p.m. Pacific as a sort of pre-show to hang out and chat and have some chicken and waffles, as is tradition. At 2 o'clock we get to watching, from opening ceremonies to the What's Next panel, and then straight to the World of Warcraft deep dive. Afterwards, if I manage to have notes, I'm going to be discussing what we've learned with you folks in the chat, give reactions and theories and gush over stuff and probably talk smack, and then upload all that into a fresh reaction video here on YouTube for the clicks. On Saturday the 20th, the tentative plan is to do the same thing. From 12 p.m. Pacific to 1 is the WoW Q&A, which I will be, again, co-streaming, and then afterwards we'll recap the Q&A with highlights, reactions, and whatever fresh thoughts that I have from the day before. Even though my coverage is going to be hyper-focused, the beauty of Blizzconline is that it's free and that it's available on demand. I've been speculating on what could be announced at BlizzConline for like the past month because really I was expecting to talk about patch 9.1 that long ago, but here we are talking about 9.0.5 instead. On the other hand, the fact that we're hearing about WoW's next patch now is that WoW's next patch is very likely to be talked about across both the What's Next and the Deep Dive panel. A Deep Dive panel, though, is kind of a hint, not a strong hint, but it's a hint that we'll be seeing some sort of new system introduced in the patch that needs explaining. It's been said numerous times that Shadowlands won't be adding brand new systems to learn and otherwise bloat the experience. It's just going to be an expansion of what we already have. Then again, we might be surprised, but by what? I wonder. I'm going to speculate based on vapor, little to no evidence, indefensible viewpoints, okay? So that's the disclaimer. According to a post from Mr. GM, some Battle.net accounts have been reported that their friend lists between both the North American and the European regions have been merged into a single list. And by some, I mean like not me. I tried adding someone from the EU and someone tried to add me, but no luck. This could be the slow rollout of something huge, starting with, of course, Battle.net players all around the world being able to speak to each other. But what I'm really getting at is for players of different regions to be able to play with each other, cross-region grouping. Now, time and time again, Blizzard has responded to the call for cross-region gameplay with a no. The reason being one part technicality and more parts legalities, that is, rules and restrictions. It could be that the hurdles are being overcome and who cares why? The point is more players being able to connect to each other. It's one of the few things that we as players can feel united asking for, like cheaper paid services or horse mounts. You can never have enough horse mounts. There's also what I briefly mentioned in our last weekly, the unlikely but practical notion of allowing Horde and Alliance players to play together. I know that you want to stop me right there, folks. Blizzard has said that the Horde versus Alliance thing is never going to go away, that it threatens the very soul of the Warcraft franchise. This is Warcraft, not Peacecraft, yada yada yada. I've heard all the pushback, but I'm going to try to be concise with this idea. I just want you to have an open mind for just a moment. Pretty please? Thanks. Now imagine this. You're making a new character. You're at that character selection, class selection screen, whatever, and on the side, in the corner, like right over here, thank you very much, right over here is a new message. You can now talk to and group with members of the opposite faction. Keep in mind that many legacy quests are specific to the faction that your race is associated with. Play in war mode to preserve the classic faction divide and enable PvP combat. Or, something like that. Without getting into every minor detail, this just about covers the notion of letting players just play together. The actual faction war doesn't need to end. Old quests don't need to change. We're just going to see some quests that are specific to a faction, just like how some quests are specific to a certain race, or a class, or a profession. An orc can walk into Stormwind City and buy a drink, but there won't be any quests there for them to pick up. There's no rep building or some arbitrary betray your faction quest thing. There's nothing to debate over. You are simply acknowledged as a champion of Azeroth, not to be immediately targeted and killed on sight. That's basically it. This obviously isn't what we would consider clean. After all, new players currently have to play through BFA content, making two new players who happen to play opposite-facing races have to make some tough decisions. The Battle of Dazar'alor raid is an obvious wrinkle, and we also need to ask, What about Pandoran? Do Pandoran have to choose an alignment, or can they actually do every quest in every region? Or can they have 2 garrisons? These are all issues that do need an answer for, but even when piling it all together, it doesn't make a convincing argument to say no. Don't do it. Expansions like Shadowlands demonstrate a very easy example where the outdoor experience is mostly shared, with a few instances where the path diverts depending on the race that you play as. Otherwise, guilds and communities are open for every race to join. The looking for a dungeon and raid finder queue will include the entire pool of players. Battlegrounds will just pretend that everyone is a mercenary and then distribute players wherever. Depicting the friction between the Horde and Alliance can still be there from now until the servers shut down. The design approach just needs to consider the obvious, that when the whole kerfuffle is dealt with, that we, the champions of Azeroth, have bigger things to deal with, and we're going to unite against the common foe as we always have through WoW's lifetime. Now couple that with the possibility of cross-region gameplay, and we've got something really exciting on our hands for a possible BlizzCon announcement. It would be wild and chaotic for a while. Like, language differences would be an obvious and natural divide among players, but otherwise we would see a massive change in the landscape. Cross-region gameplay means cross-region everything else. Everything that WoW does would and should be global, from expansion launches to reset days, which would no doubt satisfy the competitive raid scene, or at least it would, push the goalpost back to the next thing to complain about. There are plenty of other roadblocks and hurdles to overcome, but I wanted to get the thought out there. Or, would you prefer that I mention the spontaneous building found on the PTR called someone's homestead? Homestead? Could it be the name of an upcoming feature that rhymes with player housing? Okay, probably not. And that's the show. Another reminder that in less than a week, Blizzconline will be upon us, unleashing a torrent of news and spectacle, and I will be joining you, co-streaming most of the WoW-related stuff, so follow me over on Twitch, fix yourself some chicken and waffles, and join me 1 hour before the show starts. Part of Blizzconline includes the infamous WoW Q&A, and while we don't have details as of this writing, I would love to get your general questions about WoW, and I'll do my best to bump the visibility somehow, some way. Leave that in a comment below, and otherwise, get hyped. It's hard to say exactly what we're going to see, but I can't wait to share the excitement/disappointment with all of you. Thanks a ton for watching, and please like the video if you enjoyed yourself, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more of this and all things Warcraft, and we will see you next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.